If you think you're doing a good job and you think you nailed it, then man, you fucking nailed it, right? Stand on that power. Stand on your ability to carry a conversation, right? Like, be proud of what you're doing.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talk Trash, and stand back for another video. This time, I'm joined by the one and only Adam Barnard from Mind of the Meaning. So, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, sir. I appreciate it, Tom. Thanks for having me.
So, if we take this back, my friend, before any of your work with the Blue Meaning, before Foundation Radio, where do you first discover wrestling as an overall fan?
Oh, man. I think I was 5, to be honest with you, Tom. I want to say it was probably 1990 or 1989. I remember watching something on television with Hulk Hogan. And I remember telling my dad, like, wow, you got to see this. And my dad had kind of been like ancillarily aware of wrestling, I guess, from because the Spectrum, we're close to Philadelphia. So he was aware of the Spectrum and all the big matches and stuff that they had down there. And so I remember him getting we used to go to this video store in Levittown, Pennsylvania called Clyde's Video Store. And if anybody's too young to remember, video cassette tapes in the VCR, we used to go and rent them from a place. And we went to Clyde's. And the first tape that we rented was WrestleMania 3, which was the big Hogan Andre wrestling match. And from that point on, man, we were hooked. It was like, this is it. This is life. Wrestling is life from here on out. And so from that point on, it just became what we did. We watched every show. We were pre-Monday Night Raw viewers, pre-Nitro viewers. It was, and then I remember the first time I really discovered WCW or anything down south. We drove to Georgia for like a family gathering or something. And my dad's uncle at Tillman, the only thing I really remember about him is his ears were the size of dinner plates. They were huge, right?
Oh, wow.
And he had Dusty Rhodes on TV, one of Dusty's wrestling matches. I couldn't tell you which one, but I remember watching Dusty wrestle on TV, and I was young. But yeah, from that point on, man, it was a lifelong fanaticism.
So when you do become hooked, you talk about there being hooked by stuff that's already aired in videos. Are you starting to watch like live programming, or are you strictly let's go to the video store and get another tape person?
I think it was both, because I wasn't sure I can't remember if we had really if we had watched, like if there was, like, I can't remember if my dad had the cable set up then where we could get the live stuff. I don't even remember where you could find wrestling before the USA Network when Monday Night Raw was on. So I think a lot of it was because, again, back then they had like a lot of those Coliseum videotapes, right? Where you could get a bunch of the matches and you could watch a bunch of stuff that was like not necessarily old, but it was like recently recorded. So you could keep up to date on a lot of that stuff. So it wasn't, I think it was a lot of like tape stuff at first. We frequented Clyde's probably once a week just to get refreshed. And, we'd rock WrestleMania 3. I remember we rocked that tape until the tape fell off the wheels, like we had a couple copies of that joint. So, it was a little bit of both. And then again, once I would say like 93, I think is when Monday Night Raw first aired. From that point on, it was, anything live, and all pay-per-views we're getting now. So
take me back to Clyde's for a second, because Blockbuster, which was a thing in the US, but it was our sort of big video rental in the UK, they had like this deal where you could get a movie and popcorn or a thing and a snack. So was that the same with Clyde's, or was it strictly the DVDs?
No, it was the same thing. Like, so if you walked into the store, right? Like, I'm trying to picture this here. It was this big, like, I don't know, imagine like a big comic book store, right? It wasn't 2 levels, but it was just like a big open space. And you'd walk up the ramp. There was like a ramp area that went up, like before, like it was an ADA accessible ramp, and it went up, and they had stairs on the other side. And then as you walked in, there was this gigantic wall of candy that went around one side, right? And then right at the counter, there was a bunch of different candies and popcorns and sodas and stuff. And then it had just like aisles of videotapes and video games, and like the one you would walk straight back towards the back of the store, and right on the left-hand side, there was all like the Nintendo and Game Boy stuff that you could rent there. So yeah, you could get like a bunch of stuff while you were there. We always used, typically like Friday nights when we would be with my dad, we would load up pretty heavily on the candy and popcorn, and we get a couple of movies, and then always no matter what, there was always a wrestling tape in there. So it was always like this really fun event that we would do with my dad. We didn't, it was childhood was kind of rough. So it was like one of those things where it was like one of the very few things I felt like I bonded with my dad about. So doing that was like, yes, we're going to get another videotape. We're going to watch Hogan beat the shit out of somebody today, and like, it was just an exciting time. But yeah, you could, the Snickers bars and the Reese's, you get 3 of them and popcorn. But it was probably like, I don't know, back then in the 90s, I don't know, you could probably get a whole mess of stuff for like $3.
Yeah.
You can walk out and just be
Whereas
happy.
now it'd be like one candy bar.
Right. I was going to say, yeah, or you're giving away, you're giving at least a third of your gross monthly income just going to the movies, getting, a popcorn and a box of Sour Patch Kids. So at least
as someone that works in a movie theater, yes. In the UK, yes. But before this descends completely off the rails into not a wrestling podcast, how do you remember where you were when you watched the first episode of Monday Night Raw as someone that was pre-Raw era?
Let me think about this for a second. I want to say I was probably in the living room of, I think I was in the living room of my dad's house. I think we were in Levittown in Pennsylvania. And I remember we were sitting in the living room. I remember this nasty old, it was like a brown shag carpet. I don't know why we had it, but it was nasty looking. And I remember sitting on the carpet facing the television in the living room. And it was me and my brothers. And I remember watching, welcome everybody to Monday Night Raw, and the alarms and all the craziness that was going on. I couldn't tell you what the other announcer's name was, the guy that lasted for a day, but I do remember him, seeing him on TV. And then I remember one of the very few flashes of the early days before all the wacky stuff started happening, all the Trash Man and
the New Generation era.
Yeah. I remember the Undertaker and Damien Demento match. And the reason I remember Damien Demento was because Damien Demento used to scare the crap out of me. It was like Waylon Mercy, but way scarier.
Yeah.
And Damien Demento scared the crap out of me. So I was like, well, the Undertaker's less scary. And in my, 8-year-old brain, I'm like, no, this totally makes sense. He's the guy. The Undertaker's the only one that can beat this guy. So I do remember that. But no, I'm pretty sure I was at my dad's living room floor sitting in front of the TV on a Monday night.
Sorry, it cut out a little bit there.
Oh, that's okay. I said, yeah, I think it was sitting in my dad's living room, watching on our old big boxy television that was up on top of another television, of course, Tom, because I don't know if you know that's the rule.
Yeah.
If you have a big broken TV, dude, if you have a big broken TV, you put a little TV on top of it, and then everything's working again. So yeah, that's what we did here in Bucks County.
That's so weird. But
it's so freaking weird.
You talk about the New Generation era there. Was you someone that was into it and I love this, or was you someone that was nah, this is not for me?
I mean, I was young, so I was the target demo, or they would call it today the key demo, I was definitely the target for that type of material. I remember feeling at some point though, probably around, I would say maybe a couple months before Hogan turned, before the NWO happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember just feeling wow, this is really cheesy. This is just not what I thought. It's not what it used to be, because at least with Nails or Doink the Clown, those characters kind of fit into a vacuum in a lot of ways, especially Evil Doink, right? You could have got a lot of mileage out of Evil Doink. Undertaker
Evil Doink could still work today, in my opinion.
Oh, for sure. You throw in a new coat of paint on that character and you church him up to be like an It type of character. Oh my God, Tom, that would be, you're printing money. You know what I mean? You're literally most of those good gimmicks are built upon people's fears, right? Especially those heel characters. And if it's done correctly, I think you can really get away with it. But yeah, Evil Doink could definitely be done today. But no, I think at a certain point, maybe it was the Goon, or maybe it was, it wasn't the Turtle characters, because I remember vaguely hearing.
Was it Mantar?
Maybe it was Mantar. Maybe it was, and I remember just being God, this is. Am I allowed to cuss on here? I think I've cussed a couple times. Yeah. I remember just being God, this is the shit, and just being I obviously didn't say that when I was 10, but I knew the feeling about it, and I'm this is just not good. And then I'm watching, flashes of WCW, and you're Hogan's even worse down here with the Dungeon of Doom. And it's like, what the hell are we, what are we doing here? You know, like it felt like it was just, they were really running out of steam. And, you know, but again, at least for a little bit there, like I was really hooked. I remember like I just, you know, on Foundation Radio, me and I call him the executive voice. His name is Sam Krebs. I make him watch really shitty wrestling matches. So I'll make like and he's not a wrestling guy either. So I'll pick like the worst matches I can possibly find. So I did, it was the one from Survivor Series 94. It was Doink the Clown and Jerry Lawler. That match where there was like
cheesy,
clowns are
queasy,
us.
and sleazy. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And I remember being a kid and being like having like good, funny feelings about, you know, like when you're a kid, like that kind of stuff is like, oh my God, you know, the clown is going to beat the king and like it's going to be comical. And, you know, again, I'm the target demo for this. And then looking back at it 30 years later, I'm like, ooh, man, why, how did this even get to air? You know, like really, what were you guys doing here? And he said the same thing. He was like, this is really probably just like, it's insulting to watch this because it's so bad from a storyline perspective. So no, I mean, I think I was definitely like into it at the time. But again, as I got older, it got to the point where it was like, I really want to see something different. I want something different from this if I'm going to continue watching.
So you get something different with the Hogan turn and the NWO and then later WWE's Attitude Era. So how does your fandom start during the proper Monday Night Wars, like NWO versus the Attitude Era?
I can tell you it started really happening. I think it was two parts. It started to kick back in for me when the Austin 316 promo happened, because I remember watching that live as it happened. And I remember feeling like, oh, this is different. You know, he just said, whooped your ass on TV. This is weird. You know, and you're like, when you're a kid, kayfabe still kind of exists, even though it's like, you know, you still have that feeling of like, oh man, is this real? Is this happening? Like, what's going on? You know? And I remember just watching that and like watching this, like, it's funny, like watching a character like Doc Hendricks being like put into a unique situation, because he was usually the kind of guy, you know, like the hippity hoppity and like, let's do fun stuff kind of thing. And here he is getting like verbally jousted by Stone Cold Steve Austin. Right. And I remember being like, wow, this is different. Like, this is really cool. But I think the fire lit for me again, the night of Bash at the Beach, like 1996, when Hogan's turn happened, because I very vividly remember watching that entire exchange and just being like, wait, he's a bad guy. Like, never in a million, you know, from a small kid who was a Hulkamaniac for as long as I could remember, Hulk Hogan was life. Watching him turn and now being a bad guy with Razor Ramon and Diesel from the other show, you know, that was a huge moment. That was a defining moment in my life. And from that point on, I think that was the genesis for the new fandom in me, you know. And then we never missed another show after that.
Was you a channel flipper of like, let's start with Nitro tonight, and then you flip during the commercials, and maybe was you that guy?
Let me tell you something, Tom. We had two TVs in our house because my dad had gotten a good raise. So we had the old TV in the basement. If you remember, the one that used to sit on top of the broken TV. When we moved, we got rid of the broken one. And so we took the big TV and put it in the basement. And then we had the newer TV in the living room. So it was me and my brothers. I have two brothers. My older one's name is Matt and my younger one's name is David. So the three of us, we would take turns. So like one or two of us would be upstairs watching Monday Night Raw, and the other one would be downstairs watching Nitro. And we would have this like communication thing back and forth. So we could be like, oh, hey, Hogan's on, or hey, Rodman's on, come down and watch. And we would flip, you know, we'd jump and switch. And so each one of us had like a position that we played with watching the shows. And we always stayed ahead of whatever was happening. So that was the case for us for like, I felt like a couple of years, it seemed like, you know, it was like, that was just what we did. Monday nights was Monday Night Raw and Monday Nitro. But yeah, I would say we were more than just channel flippers. We were, you know, dually monitors before there was such a thing.
I know exactly what you mean there. So what was the question? Why did Nitro get the downstairs basement? That was the question.
You know, dude, I don't know. I think it was because it was on the bigger TV. Like for us, like it wasn't necessarily a status symbol. It was more like, hey, we were more because we all shared a room in the basement. Like my parents rather had renovated the basement. to be like a guy's cave, like for us growing up. So that was our room. So for us, it was like, well, we're going to settle in at the end of the night. And we're going to probably watch Nitro because usually Rodman and Hogan are on at the end of the night. So we want to watch it down here and be comfortable. So I think that was more of the case. Not necessarily it was being upstairs wasn't necessarily the,
Prime
the
spot
diamond
almost.
package. Right. Yeah.
I get what you mean totally there. So how does your fandom change? Because you seem like someone that loved the competition side of wrestling in the Monday Night Wars era. So WCW comes to an end. How does that change your fandom?
It was kind of jarring, to be honest with you, like finding out, and even ECW, again, being from the Philadelphia area, like,
Oh yeah, didn't think of
yeah, dude, ECW. Like, I remember, so my grandparents lived in Delaware County, or Delco, as we colloquial call here. And that was the only place for a period of time where we could get ECW. And I don't even remember what night it was on TV, but during the summers, we would beg my dad to take us up to my grandmother's house and we would watch it on the TV in the living room. And you would have to like tune it almost like you'd have to like twist. I can't even explain it, but like the coax cable in the
Was
back
it
of
one of
the
those
box.
things your grandparents didn't get the channel, but you faked getting the channel?
Well, sort of. Yeah. Like you could like twist the cable in the back of the box and you could turn it just enough where the signal would catch
Oh,
and you
kids,
would
you
get the
don't even
channel.
know.
You don't like the kind of crap you used to have to do to get this stuff was insane. It was, I feel like we were coders with MySpace and we, with instant messenger before that, we were like stealing cable. We were doing all kinds of crap when we were kids. And we would twist it and it would come on. I think it was WGBH and it was channel 48, if I remember correctly. And the big extreme would come on. And man, we could not get in. Once we found out ECW, like the game was changed forever, right? So once those both went away, once WCW and ECW went away, I think it was a little bit different. It was a bit of an adjustment because it was like, I think like everybody, we had the idea that like the invasion was going to be like, Austin and Goldberg and the Outsiders versus the Brothers of Destruction. You know what I mean? Like we like all of our dream matches that we thought were going to happen and really didn't come to fruition. I think a lot of that was kind of disappointing for us, and even too, like the invasion storyline was kind of disappointing. Like we can call it what it is, right? There was a lot of that missed for me. I think the one thing that missed for me the most was the Diamond Dallas Page stuff
Yeah.
because I felt like he could have been so over in WWE. Like just his character worked. And he even told me he's been on Foundation Radio before. And he told me on the show, he was like, what he pitched was The Rock versus DDP. And it was People's Champion
Two
versus
people's
People's
champs.
Champion. And I mean, Tom, like even you get like, you know what I mean? Like somebody who I don't know how old you are. I don't want to assume, but like, I don't know if you grew up during that time,
I did
but
not.
like, okay. So even, someone who didn't grow up in that time could see the value in that.
Mm.
And they basically told him like, no, we're not going to do that. And it was like, well, what the hell are we doing here? And it just, the Undertaker, I think there could have been an avenue for him and Undertaker to do something, but I don't think whatever they did was not good. So no, I think it tested my fandom a little bit. And there was times where I like came in and out of it. Cause again, like that time there was a lot of like
Real
throw enough
life.
shit against the wall and see what sticks. Yeah. And again, I'm like, I was getting older and stuff. And I was in my late teens, early 20s at the time. So it definitely like it took a back seat for a little while. But not much, I still watched like, but it just wasn't as intense as it was, when I was a kid.
You talk about wrestling taking a back seat there. What is one moment that maybe it took a back seat? Maybe you chose not to watch that night because you were doing something else, and you turn on the next day and you're like, "Oh man, I wish I watched this live." And then to flip the question, what is one moment that you were like, "I'm going to stay in and I'm going to watch this live," and you're like, "Yeah, that was a bad idea."
Um, so the night that I didn't watch and the night that I wish I would have watched because I went out and do something else. I can't remember what it was. I was probably out doing something stupid with my friends. Was the night that Eric Bischoff came out on Monday Night Raw.
Mm.
And I missed that. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I missed it because I thought everybody's lying to me. I was like, what do you mean Easy E is on Monday Night Raw? Like, what are you talking about? So that was definitely a time I wish I would have watched. A time I definitely wish I hadn't watched was Katie Vick.
Mm.
Unfortunately, I watched that spot with Triple H in the mortuary. It was one of those things where I wish I just could like erase that from my brain. And like looking
Mm,
back at that, I'm like, they aired this, right? Like this was not me having a fever dream, right? Like this was
mm.
on TV.
It happened.
And that was, I think that for me, that was the night that I wish I hadn't watched. And that was the night for me too, where I think honestly, like, I think I gave up for a while too, because I was like, this is too much for me. You know, like there's a certain line, and you know, some people have some people have their preferences and they can watch kind of and do those kinds of things. But for me, it was like I need a timeout. Like this is a
Mm.
lot.
You talk about needing the time out there. So, where is your current fandom? How do you get into? Where is your current fandom? Sort of as we record this in August of 2023. Where would you say your current fandom is?
Honestly, man, it's at an all-time high again. Like I feel like I'm watching as a kid again. Um, it came back. So my oldest son is 10. He turned 10 in June of this year. And a couple years back, like I think I started like slowly introducing stuff to him, right? You can't show a little kid the Attitude Era, right? You got to show him the Golden Age, and you got to show him
Yeah,
Hogan and
yeah.
Andre and all the classics, right? So I started showing him a lot of that, and he started to like slowly get into it and slowly started to do things. And then we had this like really cool experience with Bill Goldberg, who did something just so wonderful for my son. And at that point, from like I think it was probably for at least like the way my fandom was, because I had watched, right? Like I had watched like even all throughout there, and I'd watched again in college, and um, I remember when CM Punk, I was at in Philadelphia at Night of Champions, the night that Jeff Hardy beat CM Punk for the big gold belt. So I remember like, well, I was a big fan of CM Punk. I loved his stuff, and there was a lot of stuff from that timeline. I don't want to say it was probably after Ruthless Aggression, but I think they call it the PG era. Maybe there's a lot of
Yeah.
stuff from that, and like Sting, like I loved watching Sting come back, and um, but I think really like probably like 2019 when my oldest son really started to get into it was really when it kicked back into high gear. And I'll tell you, man, I know a lot of people like to shit on the performance center stuff and the Thunderdome pandemic era. But if it wasn't for a lot of that stuff, like I don't know if my fandom would be where it is right now. And I don't know if the
Okay, that's
connection I would have,
interesting.
I don't know if like the connection I made to the program and the product would be as strong as it is right now, because my kids loved it so much. It was like one of the saving graces that we all had during that initial time in our lives, right? Like we couldn't go out, there was nothing to do, everything was closed, couldn't see anyone, and what we still had was wrestling, and it was still there. Yeah, it was weird and it was goofy, and you have Jay Uso doing a contest with a singing contest or whatever it was, and it was just
Oh, I
like
forgot about that.
you know it was weird, right? And it's like, yeah, they're doing, but like I never really complained about it, because it's like it's just something that needs to exist in the moment, right? They're trying to do anything they can to keep the product on TV and keep people entertained. And I'm grateful that we're doing something. Is everything great? Of course not. Like it sucks. A lot of it is goofy and odd, but it was something, and at least something was being tried.
Mm.
And so from that point, and again, too, like, and I think watching at that time also bred that excitement about Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman with the bloodline, because that's when that story really started. And so
Mm.
I think, without all of that happening, with that almost like a perfect storm, I don't know if I would be, as fanatical as I am now.
How did, because as someone that loves competition in wrestling, uh, during the Attitude Era, how did WWE get into major competition in AEW? Change your fandom
I don't know if it changed my fandom, because I think,
or helped your fandom, whatever
or
word you
helped it.
want to
Yeah.
use.
I mean, I think it definitely like I think AEW coming into the program and coming into the mix allowed WWE to get more creative. And I think with I want to be careful the way I say this, because I don't want to say it the wrong way and people be like, "Oh, what do you mean? You didn't do that?" Blah, blah, blah. What I mean by this statement is I think that like for a lot of reasons, I think the bloodline story may not have happened without competition or the pandemic or other things, because I think what happened was they took a chance, right? Like when you hear the story of the bloodline and how it started, and Roman is the head of the table, Roman was pissed about his creative,
Yeah.
and he didn't want to keep doing the dog food stuff with Baron Corbin. And not that there's anything wrong with Baron Corbin. I just, like at a certain point, you're maxed out, right? You're maxed out in the story. He doesn't want to come back and do this. He doesn't want to do the spot with Goldberg. And so he links up with Paul Heyman. do you think without competition, and everybody, Vince may act like he doesn't care, but obviously he may care because anything's a and TNA was a competition, even if they weren't, right?
I believe
It's
anything's a competition personally, like because we can choose to go out and watch a film rather than watching wrestling. Personally,
exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a fair statement too. But I also think that they're not blind, or that Vince isn't really blind to the fact that this company exists, right? Because if he was, then he wouldn't have picked up Cody, right? Like let's call it what it is. But
mm.
I think for a lot of reasons they were like, you know what? Let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens here. Let's roll the dice. What's the worst that happens? The fans and the crowd rejects it, and we can always pivot to something else. And here it turns out 3 years later, we're still involved in arguably the greatest wrestling storyline of all time. And so I think that definitely helped navigate. And I think, competition is always healthy for everyone. I will say that I'm still struggling a bit to connect with the AEW product. Maybe just because it's, and it's not that it's bad. Maybe it's just not everything is my style. I can appreciate what a lot of those guys do, especially a lot of the top. And again, I'm a CM Punk guy, so him and FTR, I love what they do. But I think sometimes it's just I love the combination of the action and the story. And for me, sometimes I feel like the story is not nearly as cohesive as a WWE thing. And I attribute that a lot to the fact that they're still a young company, right? They're still building, and they put a lot of pieces in together. I know they just hired Will Washington to do, I think he's part of like creative or something now.
He's
So
basically their continuity person, I believe. I
right,
believe.
I think that's what it was. So it's like, okay, so like they're making positive steps in the right direction. And obviously hiring Will to be their, call it continuity guy, that's going to be helpful for them doing stories going forward. So I don't necessarily think that I don't think anything they're doing is necessarily bad or any worse than WWE. I just think I'm having trouble connecting with some of the stories because of that issue. But again, I'm always rooting for that company. I'm rooting for everybody that's in it. And I think competition is good. And I think that we're living in this really amazing boom era of wrestling right now, which I didn't think could come back after the Attitude Era.
Oh, a refreshing. I'm not an AEW fan, but it's cool for anyone that is. How
Yeah,
refreshing.
dude,
Ooh.
like Tom, I mean, imagine like not, and I know that friend of the show, Cameron Hawkins, has been on here the innovator of the phrase touching grass. Like, I can't imagine sitting behind my keyboard and screaming and railing about AEW fandom and people who want to be fans of AEW and having these like it's like, guys, literally we are here for a split second. Like, we're gonna spend this time arguing about this crap. Like, this is crazy,
We're all
right?
wrestling fans.
And again, it's like, if you don't like the product, that's fine. I change my mind. If there's something about the show that you think is going to help me connect with the product or connect with a specific talent, I'm all about it. Like, I want as much wrestling in my life as possible because it's always been such a beautiful thing for me. And I'm certainly not going to sit here and rag or shit on anybody who likes it. No, man, I'm hyped for you that you found something that you connect with. Do I want to see both companies excel and get better at things that they do? Of course. There's always room for improvement for everybody. But I don't think I think it's reductive to sit here and argue with someone on Twitter nonetheless about, his AEW fandom. No, bro, good for you, man. I'm glad you found something that you like. I'm glad you connected to a product or a storyline or anything because it's bringing you happiness. It's bringing you joy. And I would never say anything negative to anybody like that. I think it's stupid.
Have you considered doing TED Talks for Twitter? Like
Honestly,
genuine.
I've thought about it. Yeah, people have asked me. They were like, "Oh, you should be like a motivational speaker, or talk to people about your positivity and things." And like, it's not always positive like this. Like, not everything in life is positive this way. And I'm not always in this space, but like,
Oh, this is a beautiful segue, which I'm going to use in a minute if you don't mind. But please
yeah,
continue.
no, I just think it's like you're not always like, people aren't always you know social media is your avatar, right? Social
Mm.
media allows you to be anything that you want to be, and that you allow social media allows you to be what you want people to see. And people don't get to see all like the dark stuff and all the things, the struggles that you have, and all the mountains you got to climb, and all the things that go on in your life that knock you down.
Mm.
It's a segment of your reality. And I think that people get lost in that. And I think Twitter specifically allows people to be anonymous in their vitriol. And I think that's really dangerous sometimes too. You know, not to get on that kind of conversation, but like I think that's a
I agree.
dangerous place. I think it's a dangerous place to be because there's no way to hold account to anyone who sits behind, you know, an avatar of Roman
A
Reigns or Kenny
logo in my
Omega.
a logo
Or,
in my case because I have my YouTube logo.
but even still, like that's not like that's when with your setup, it's different because you're promoting your brand, right? You're promoting your show, you're doing your thing. You're not somebody that's just like arguing with people about Roman Reigns and the bloodline versus Kenny Omega and the elite, right? Like you're not doing anything that's negative in those aspects, right?
Mm.
People are allowed to they can be anonymous. They can make up fake accounts, right? They can get blue check marks and pretend to be somebody now, right? It's
Mm.
just it becomes like I don't know, it takes the fun out of everything. Like it just sucks the life out of everything. It's not pleasant. It's not pleasant to deal with. And I see it happen all the time.
Mm. You brought up there the fact that life isn't always great, the fact that it's not pleasant to deal with. With your work with Foundation Radio
Mhm.
and the Blue Meaning podcast, which we will get to in a sec about how they all came about. How do you keep the old mental health at bay when maybe you get a
Hmm.
comment about a Blue Meaning episode? Maybe people are like, "This was really bad" or something. And same with Foundation Radio. How do you not let negative comments affect you?
Wow. It's a good question, Tom. I will tell you that there is no one on earth or in any other space that could ever be a bigger critic of me than me. I'm the one that hears all the imperfections. I'm the one that hears myself stutter through sentences. I'm the one who sees, you know, the lack of focus inside of my photographs, right? I'm the one that picks apart all my stuff and the way I asked a question, right? So there's nobody that can be meaner to me than me. It definitely sucks though, man. I won't lie. You know, I've seen some comments from people. I mean, luckily though, like knock on wood, um, most people have been really like pleasant and nice about my content and the stuff I do with Meanie and different things I put out. Very rarely do I have someone who will say something negative, you know.
Mm.
Um, but I think it's important, like, and I've learned a lot just from my own like mental health work and you know, some of the things I've done in my life is like the people who tend to be the most negative are the ones who would never take those risks themselves and
Mm.
never put themselves out there to be in a position where they would have to be criticized or have to be pulled apart by somebody, right? And I think it's important to center yourself when you think about those things. And I think it's important to reflect on first where they may be in their mental space, right? Um, because a lot of times people who spit that kind of vitriol at you usually aren't in a good place themselves.
The phrase Jimmy Van said to me, and I've lived by this ever since we did that interview, was misery loves company.
Exactly. There's a difference between nuanced and approached critique and constructive criticism versus just, you know, frankly being a dick, right? Like there are ways to go about having conversation and discourse with people and bringing attention to things that can be changed, excuse me, or bring attention to things that maybe could be done in a different way, or even issues where it's like representation, right? Like if they're not representing and you don't see enough people of color on TV and you don't see enough, you know, LGBTQ representation, or you don't see enough representation of any kind, there's a way to approach those conversations and there's a way to have that discourse without it falling apart into any kind of madness, right? And it's
Mm.
typically only on one side, right? It's typically only on one side where people get mad about this thing. And it's the kind of people that don't want that kind of representation on TV. And I think that again, like I always try to just I try to look at things and think about where people may be in their own lives. And one of the
Mm.
best pieces of advice, if I could talk here, that I've ever gotten was actually from someone that I work with now. And they said to me, like, whenever the stuff starts or anybody starts jumping at you, the best thing you can do is no sell because no response is a response. And that's typically how I operate, man. Like, I don't have
Mm,
time for negativity. If you're going to come on my page and you're going to do this and you're going to be nasty and you're going to be loud and obnoxious, I'm just going to block you and I'm going to keep it moving. That's
mm,
that's what I'm going to do. And I typically, very, very rarely will I engage with somebody on Twitter. Very rarely will I engage with somebody on Instagram or my own personal Facebook. Like, you know, it's just not worth the energy. It's not worth the effort. And I think that that keeps me going mostly. You know, if you don't like my work, that's fine. You can find somebody's work that you like and somebody that you want to watch or somebody that you want to enjoy. You're here on your own accord.
mm.
Um, but I think that really helps me keep myself kind of steady, you know, with
Yeah,
all the stuff I have going on in my life, you know, and it's like, it's not just here. Like, I think that that applies in life in general.
that's very, very cool. And been quite a frank discussion about mental health there. So I do really appreciate it. So
Man,
as
that's my bag, dude. I talk very openly on my social media platforms about my struggles with mental health and the things that are going on in my life. Like, I'm an open book to a fault sometimes, you know, and
mm,
I never shy away from those things because there have been times where I've looked to others and I've looked to other people and their experiences in order to help me get through my own.
mm,
And I often hope that in some instances, like, maybe if someone could see that what I'm going through and how I'm working through it and it may help them, it's worth it. You know, we're not, again, like I said, go back to the thing about the avatar, right? Like, I'm not, if I'm going to be somebody online, I want to be the authentic person that I am. Like, yeah, I make a ton of fucking mistakes. I fuck up a lot. And, you know, but I'm still here and I'm trying and I'm doing everything I can to have today be a good day. Right. I'm
mm,
human. We're all human. We all make mistakes and we all do things. And, I think it's important to be honest about that. And I
mm.
think, you know, being open and available for people in those positions is the right thing to do.
I fully agree. I feel really bad just segueing and going, so how did you but that's where we got to go. And I do
Hey,
really
man. Hey, no,
apologize.
no, you're good, man. No, you're good.
So how do you get involved in this crazy wrestling media world? Does Foundation Radio come first, or does the Blue Meanings podcast come first?
So it was Foundation Radio that came first. So Foundation Radio actually started as a college radio show. So I went to Westchester University here in Westchester, Pennsylvania, and I
Hmm.
had a show here on 91.7 WCUR The Curve. And it was this name that I had. So, like, Foundation Radio goes all the way back to like 2005, where my buddy Kurt and we had this, like, literally like this shitty little dingy podcast when it was a very first thing back when like iPods were a thing, right? And we were trying to figure out this medium and we couldn't figure it out. We couldn't crack the code. So we kind of just like forgot about it. And I get on the radio and I'm like, I got to come up with a cool show name. Like, I got to come and think of something. Right. And I was like, oh, maybe this is it. Foundation Radio. We're on the radio, you know, whatever it is. And it becomes like a thing. Right. So we had the highest rated show in WCUR's history for a while. Like, you know, a friend of mine at the time, Bam Margera, came on the show and like really helped establish us. And there was another guy, Joe, who joined the show with us, who got us like broadcast like all through Westchester and all through like different counties in Chester County. So we were on there for a couple years. We took some time off, and then like right before the pandemic, we rebooted, and it was just like kind of like goofy shit. Like, we would play like Dungeons and Dragons, and you know, we drink beer in the morning and do like a beer summit. You know, like the dumb stuff, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Once the pandemic hit, I was like, you know, I really think maybe I should try like having conversations with people. You know, like having interviews and stuff. And so the very first interview I did in the wrestling space was with Conrad Thompson from adfreeshows.com. Wonderful, wonderful guy. Like,
Ooh.
Conrad is
Bucket list.
man, Conrad is one of the coolest dudes in the whole world. And I think from that point, you know, because again, I had some other folks on, like I had Asher Roth, the musician, and Tommy Chong, but Conrad was really the one who like kind of opened my eyes to be like, wow, maybe I could explore this wrestling fandom thing.
Mm.
And then so we moved to Pittsburgh the end of 2020 into 2021, and I was like kind of getting ready to give up on the show. I was like, you know, I don't want to do this anymore. And there's actually two people that helped me. There's a guy named Duke Bennett who hosts Duke Loves Wrestling, and there's a guy named Josh Chernoff who hosts So Says Chernoff. So
Mm.
Duke and I linked up and we started doing some shows together. And he was like, hey man, he's like, I really enjoy your product. You know, let's start building together and we can start connecting with people. And concurrently at the same time, Josh and I did a spot together on my show. around the same time Duke and I did. And that's kind of how it started, right?
Mm.
So Foundation Radio became a place for like a lot of up and coming wrestlers, and then that's when Eric Bischoff ended up on the show, and then Diamond Dallas Page was shortly after that, and we've had like the Renegade Twins, Shane Taylor, who currently wrestles for Ring of Honor, was on the show as well.
Mm.
John Alba, so a bunch of these people I'm starting to make connections with. And Josh calls me, and he says, "Hey, listen, man, I got to do some," because at the time he was working for Fight TV. He was like, "Hey, listen, I got to do a fight on location. I got to do something. I got to go away for this week. Can you sit in with me, or can you sit in for me on Mind of the Meanie?" He's like, "The show I do with Blue Meanie." I was like, "Yeah, sure, absolutely. Like let's make it happen." So I end up sitting in and doing the show with Meanie, and our chemistry is like unbelievable, right? Like we have a really
Clicks.
great show, and it clicks right away, and everything makes sense. So I start doing more sit-ins as Josh starts to get more busy with Fight, and he says, "Listen, man, like there's this opportunity. I have some things that I'm working on, and I'm not gonna be able to really commit to the show anymore." So we have this conversation, and then I end up taking over Mind of the Meanie with Meanie, and it becomes this like really incredible dynamic. We're like the dynamic duo every Monday, and I just enjoy it so much. So that's really how I kind of get into this world. And then it becomes, then Rob Van Dam comes on the show, and it starts to really kind of like click for me. And then I end up at SummerSlam this past weekend as media, covering the event. So it's just like, it just kind of, it happened. I want to say it happened fast, but it also didn't. Like it felt like it happened like right away, right?
You are the
Um,
perfect definition of a 15-year overnight sensation sort of
that's
thing.
exactly right. That's exactly right. Yes. A 15-year overnight sensation. Right. And again, like I am painfully aware that I am just starting in this space, right? Um, and I'm just really getting my feet wet and just really getting into this.
Mm.
And I am grateful for every opportunity. I'm grateful for every connection that I make. I'm grateful for every piece of assistance and collaboration that I've got. I met so many amazing people, man, at SummerSlam. Cameron Hawkins, he wasn't at SummerSlam, but like one of my, he
One
champions
of
pretty
the
much.
nicest dudes.
Oh my God, just the coolest, like amazing. Public Enemies podcast. I just did a spot with them this past week. Always super supportive of my stuff. Sir Wilkins from the Jobber Tears podcast. Like there's so many, Haley from Fightful Overbooked. Like there's so many people that have just been so wonderful and so accommodating and like sharing my work and wanting to build a collaborative space with me. And I think that really goes a long way in this space too. So,
Mm.
no, it's been a really exciting ride, and I feel like
Mm.
the ride just got started.
Yeah, you talk about the ride just getting started there. If the ride is just getting started for you, my friend, what's on your bucket list? Who do you want to work with? Things like that.
Well, my big bucket list item, and this should not be a shock to anyone. My big bucket list item is to have Cody Rhodes on Foundation Radio.
Mm.
That's really and I'm like, I'm really trying hard for that. I'm really working towards making that happen, even if it's just 15 minutes. Man, I'm a Star Trek guy, and I know that he is too. And I have questions about his favorite captain. Not that there's anything wrong with Cisco, but I just want to know why he picked Cisco over Picard. That's all I want to know.
Mm.
That's all. I think that's a fair question to ask the American Nightmare.
Yeah.
No, I think Cody is one of those people that I could have a really dynamic conversation with, and I think it would be a lot of fun to talk to him. Um, I want to do media at WrestleMania this year, because it's coming up in Philadelphia. So being right here, literally
Oh
40 minutes from my house,
yeah.
that's really what I'm going for. That's going to be the next thing, I think. Um, bucket list items. I think honestly, maybe talking to Stone Cold Steve Austin would be really cool as well. I think like as an Attitude Kid,
Mm.
I think that would be an amazing deal. Um, and then also probably CM Punk. I think those are a good three bucket list deal, plus WrestleMania. So
Mm.
what about you, Tom? Let me ask you, what's on your bucket list, man?
Oh, it's gonna sound like I'm blowing smoke, but I was in the tentative position of getting an interview with Eric Bischoff. I'd love to make that happen. I'd
Wow.
love to make that happen. Uh, you put me on the spot there, man. And I'd love to say I did media for any event. because of my, I don't want to make it sound like woe is me, but because of my medical situation,
Mm,
obviously it's a lot harder for me to get to uh, uh, events and planes and stuff. So I'd love to just tick off. I was in a media room for one event. Do you know what I mean?
absolutely. Yeah.
And then this is a big one. Chris Van Vliet. I want to get him on the show.
Oh man, Chris is a wonderful guy. I've had him on Foundation. He was I met him for the first time in person at in Detroit at SummerSlam. And just a wonderful guy, just like nice as can be. And you meet him and you're like, okay, now I get why you're number one. Like now I
Mm,
get why you're the guy, right?
mm.
Just an
Yeah.
amazing guy, just a super cool guy. So no, that's a great bucket list, man. And just Eric is Eric is one of like the nicest people, like, and just one of the easiest people to talk to as well. Like he's been on Foundation twice, and he is just like asking him those questions, and he'll answer pretty much anything you ask him, which is amazing. So I'm rooting for you, Tom. I really am. I'm
Mm,
rooting for you.
mm. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'm not going to lie, my friend. It's been amazing chatting with you. But you brought up earlier there something very, very cool about you tried to start your own podcast when podcasts weren't really a thing, right? So,
Yeah.
if you could go back now with the knowledge you have when it comes to podcasting, how do you think Foundation Wrestling would be different when you did it the first time and things like that?
That's a good question, Tom. And to be clear, I've loved this conversation as well. This has been a ton of fun. And thank you for the invite. Thank you for having me on. Um, oh, I think I wouldn't have given up as easily as I did.
Mm.
I think a lot of times in my head too, I tend to overthink, right? I tend to overthink and
Preach.
I try to find the perfect question. I try to find the perfect thing to ask and the perfect thing to say. And I think instead of doing that, I got to just be more in the moment, right? And that's true for like most of my life, right? Like I just got to be more in the moment in that setting.
Mm.
So I think back then I thought I had to be like, Mr. Radio, and we have to do this thing and blah blah blah. And it's like I could have just been myself this whole time and leaned into, excuse me, my wrestling fandom and just been me.
Mm.
And it would have worked. It would have got me where I needed to be. And I think, again, like back then, they didn't make it super easy for you to publish podcasts onto an iPod, right?
Mm.
And there was no social media. There was MySpace, but you couldn't advertise the way you could now, right? Like you had to go, like it was a whole different market then. So I think hindsight, I wish I would have stayed after it, and I wish I would have like continued to try to do it. Because I think it could have put me in a better position now. But I don't have any regrets. Like I listening back to some of the material I have, which will always stay in the archive. It's really bad. So
Mm.
like I'm glad it never went anywhere than farther than my hard drive here. But no, I think maybe not giving up and not being more in the moment. I think is one of the things I wish I would have done more of.
What would I don't know how old you were at the time, but what would college foundation radio Adam think of what Adam is doing now?
Oh, dude, he'd be geeking right now. 7-year-old me, 17-year-old me, 25-year-old me would be flipping out right now, knowing that we have met some of our favorite wrestlers. We have interfaced and are friends with some of our favorite wrestlers. That we went to SummerSlam and sat in the press box, right? Like we've accomplished so much in our life, and we've done so many amazing things in our life that we wanted to do, and things are just literally getting started right now. Like
Hmm.
things are just starting to heat up for us right now. And I
Uh,
think,
sorry,
oh no,
continue.
it's okay. I think, I think they would be stoked, man. I think, I think they would be surprised that we were able to do all of this, but I think they would be stoked, and I think they would be excited to see what happens next.
Mm. You talk about what happens next there. I'm going to throw a cloud of doom at you, my friend, and say, if this was to all end tomorrow, would you be
Mm.
happy with what you've accomplished, for one? But also, what do you want your legacy to
Oh man, Tom, it's funny you said that. I think about that a lot. Um, I'll give you this answer. You probably won't expect this answer, but I'm going to give this to you anyway. And I should say, I'm going to preface my answer with a little bit more information about me that I think you may be the first to know, like publicly like this, right?
Okay.
So, when my mom was pregnant with me, I was actually a twin,
Mm-hmm.
and my twin died in utero.
Mm-hmm.
So probably at least before the first trimester, I think. And the doctor said to my mom and my dad that if I were to survive this pregnancy, I would be born with deformities and serious debilitating disabilities to the point where I would not be able to like have a functioning normal quote unquote life, right?
Mm.
This is 1985. Okay. So I was born without either of those things and I survived and I made it. And for a long time, I was very, based upon my life, I have looked at things in a very skewed lens when I shouldn't have. Instead of being grateful, I was angry. And instead of being thrilled to be alive, I was pissed that I was alive. And nothing's going my way and this, that, and the other. And I'm angry. And it wasn't until my kids were born where things started to really change for me. And I started to look at things in a different way. And I started to realize that I was living literally on borrowed time, right? I exist in spite of the fact that I shouldn't. And every day that I've been alive has been on borrowed time. And doing these things now, I may not be as well known as a lot of people, and not everybody is aware of who I am yet. And that's okay, because eventually they will be. And I'm going to get to those places and I'm going to attain those things. But man, I'm so fucking grateful to be alive every day these days. Genuinely. Yeah. I'm so grateful to wake up and get dressed and see my kids and my wife and my family and be here and get to do things, get to talk to you, get to talk to other amazing people all day long. And I'm grateful for that. So I think if everything were to end tomorrow, man, I couldn't think of a better way to go out. I'm grateful. Of course, I don't want that to happen. I'm hoping that with the advances in modern science, I can live to be at least 230 something. But I hope that if it does, I mean, again, I'm grateful. I'm grateful just to even be here. I'm grateful just to even have this experience right at this moment, And I hope that my legacy is I hope it's a good one, man. The perception you have of yourself is much different than everybody else has of you. But I hope that my legacy would be that I was fair and that I was kind to people and that I did my best, because nobody's perfect, but I did the best that I could and I made amends where I could and I took responsibility and that I was a friendly person. And I hope I hope that's what my legacy is. I hope that was the answer you were looking for.
Ooh, that was heavy, but that was very cool. I feel like this is one of those things, because I was just saying, what if you stopped a podcast?
No,
but
here I am waxing poetic with you, man. Yeah, no, wow. I mean, that's funny, man. No, I mean, if I stop the podcast tomorrow too, though, I mean, again, like I'm grateful, right? Like I'm grateful for the experiences. I'm grateful for the opportunities, and I'm grateful just to have the chance to be here, to be doing what I'm doing. So
you talk about doing what you're doing there. We will wrap this up soon because I do want to be respectful of your time.
Oh, you're good, man. I have all the time in the world for you.
But when you are putting a podcast together for Foundation Radio or Blue Meaning, what's your prep like?
So it depends. Typically, Meanie and I, we just kind of wing it. Right. Like we talk, frequently during the week, like we're always, sharing memes and shit. But typically for the show, it's like, unless there's like a major wrestling event or wrestling item that happens, we don't really rehearse or anything like that. Like we don't have notes or anything. We just kind of go into it. We wing it, talk about our days. We talk about anything that's happening in Philadelphia. Excuse me. Let COVID cough there. I'm trying to stop it. Sorry, man.
That's cool.
No, we typically, yeah, we don't really prep before the show, which I think helps us because it's like, we don't really discuss too much before that. So it keeps everything fresh for us, As far as Foundation Radio goes, Depending on the conversation that I have, I try not to prep too much. I try to have bullet points for myself. And then at least that way I can kind of just like riff on the fly, right? So if I have a piece that I could ask like Eric Bischoff about the specific thing, I know that he's going to he's going to discuss a whole bunch of different things, and then I can just sort of pick off of that and then have a really dynamic conversation, right? So I think that's really where I kind of dial into is more specifics. Now, if it's like because I've had one of my colleagues and friends, his name is Robert Costa. He's on CBS News. He's here in the States, and he's done some spots on the BBC as well. But when he was on, we did a spot about his book that he wrote with Bob Woodward. So for
Oh,
that
wow.
kind of conversation, I would literally, I'm sitting there and I'm making as many detailed notes as I can and trying to come up with as many informative questions about the book as I can, and things of that nature. So it really it's contextual on who I'm having on the show, what message I want to get across, and how much time I have.
Hmm. For example, I'll give you an example. Say you were going to have meat. Let's use meat. I hate to do things like that because that sounds self-indulgent. But what would your prep be if you were going to have meal?
So I would try to find as much detail about you as I can. I try to ask the questions that nobody has really asked before.
Mm.
I also tend to not listen to other shows or other information that's like any other podcast you may have been on, any other like live streams you may have been on. I also find that like I'm not really a person who cares about repetition in that regard. Like I want to ask you questions about things I want to know about you. And
Mm.
like if somebody else or two or three other people may have asked that, so be it. I don't care. I want to know this because I know that my listeners are listening to this because they're asking the same questions, right? Like who is Tom? Why is he talking rubbish? Where is his wrestling fandom from? Like a lot of the times I'm going to have bullet points and I'm going to find out like a couple, major things about you, and maybe one thing that's like a little factoid that like maybe like you said in an off chance somewhere, and it's like tell me more about that. But other than that, it's going to be kind of like more, hey man, let's chat. Like I want to know more about you as the individual, and more like what this is. I think
Mm.
this is what people engage with. This is what people want to listen to. They want to learn about people. They want to have conversations, and they want to come away learning something. So I think that's the key to it.
That's very, very cool. You brought up praising my show there, and I do really appreciate that. As a fellow interviewer, before we do the wrap-up questions of generic questions and a couple of other bits, any improvements you'd like to see from me, and what did you enjoy, what can I improve on, etc.
I think you're doing a fantastic job, and I think the only advice I can give you here is always focus on how you think you did. Because for a long time, I feel like I didn't focus on how I felt it went. And I always looked for the external validation. And I don't think it's necessary for me
Mm.
to look for that from people. You know, if you think you're doing a good job and you think you nailed it, then man, you fucking nailed it. Right. Stand on that power, stand on your ability to carry a conversation, right? Like be proud of what you're doing. Because I can feel that coming through this conversation. Like you're great at this. You ask a lot of great questions. Um, I like your follow-ups. You're asking to you're not asking to respond. You're asking to listen and then
It
respond,
doesn't
right?
sound like I'm reading off a checklist, basically.
Exactly. Right. Like this it doesn't feel prepped. And I think that's 90% of the game.
Mm.
Like you're not, and I think that's really that's the key to this. So no, I think you're doing a great job. I think this was fun. This was fantastic. And I'm excited to go back even farther into your vault and listen to the other stuff that you've done so far and find out more about people that I've worked with. Maybe there's stuff
Mm.
in there that I don't know about them that we haven't talked about before. And no,
Mm.
I think you're doing a great job, man.
I really appreciate that.
Of
But
course.
as we look at wrapping this up, Adam, because I do want to be
Sure.
respectful of your time,
You're
we're
good,
going to
man.
do a segment that I call generic questions. Those of you that have seen my interviews before, when I used to ask my guests their favorite wrestling match, favorite pay-per-view, favorite wrestler's entrance music, favorite tag team, and favorite wrestler. Basically, questions that Adam might be asked on social media. So now he'll have a place to be like, guys, I have been asked this. Go watch this. So, what's your favorite wrestling match of all time?
My favorite wrestling match of all time. Rock and Hogan,
Mm.
WrestleMania 18.
Hmm. Why does
That would
that
be
one
my
speak
favorite.
to you?
I think it was just the perfect blend of the two worlds, right? Attitude Era versus Nitro, right?
Hmm.
Hogan versus The Rock, like two of the biggest names in wrestling history, wrestling together in anywhere, right? And I think it was more about the experience than necessarily because I don't listen to star ratings, I don't listen to that crap, but like I think just the vibe and just the fact that it was so impactful, I think that is what makes it so. That's what makes it stand out so much in my life.
Hmm. Where were you when you watched that match the first time?
Oh gosh, what was that? That was 2002, right?
I
2002,
believe
2003.
so, yes.
So I was probably at my parents' house watching in the living room, watching it on our TV because we ordered every pay-per-view. So I was probably sitting in my parents' place watching it on TV.
Hmm. That's very, very cool. What about your favorite overall pay-per-view? And when I say pay-per-view, I mean specific card, like Double or Nothing
Hmm,
2019, for example.
I see. My favorite card. Hmm, that's a
I
good
need to
question.
change that in the email, I reckon, just to make people more aware.
Let's see. Favorite card. Man, I really dug this year's WrestleMania.
Hmm.
Um, I really thought the way they staggered the both nights was great. Obviously, there was a couple, not every card is perfect, right? I think, if we're looking recent, I would say probably WrestleMania 39. But SummerSlam 92 was pretty dope.
Hmm.
That was a pretty great pay-per-view card, bell to bell. Um, yeah, so I'm gonna go with those two.
Very, very cool. What about your favorite wrestler's entrance piece?
Oh man, are you talking about like classic or current?
You did two for pay-per-view, so I'm going to ask for two.
All right. So I would say classic. It's got to be Stone Cold. There's just something iconic about that music, man. That the freaking glass breaking and the place going, bananas. Current, man, the Usos theme is pretty dope. Like that
Hmm.
is a banger. But then
It
also
might,
like, go
I was
ahead.
about to say, it might not be current by the time this airs, but
Yeah, oh yeah, with the split. Yeah, we're probably. I would say they're so again, yeah. So I would say maybe their original music. But I'm also a fan of Finn Balor's music with the Judgment Day.
hmm.
Oh my God, man. And Io Sky too, like the bangers, back to back bangers, man. Those records are, I'm in Detroit. I'm up in the press box and Finn Balor's music hits, man. And I'm telling you, like the windows were rattling at the stadium. The bass was pumping so hard. Man, that music knocks. Yeah, I would say it's either the Usos, like current stuff. It's either the Usos or Finn Balor with a nod to Io Sky.
What about of all time?
Of all
Oh, you said
time,
of all time it was
all
Steve
time, yeah,
Austin.
no, yeah, Steve
Sorry,
Austin,
yeah,
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 for
yeah.
sure. No,
I
no, you're
do
good, man. You're
apologize.
good. No, don't. You're good.
And then, who is your favorite wrestling tag team?
Usos. I'm sorry. Wait, let me take that back. The Dudley Boys, my favorite of all time.
So, you gave me two answers there, my friend. So, what we do when someone gives us two answers, and yes, comment section. I know it's happened before, but in their primes, we get to book the Dudleys versus the Usos in their
Oh man.
primes.
Oh
You get the
man.
pen, my friend. Where is it happening, and who goes over, and what kind of match is it?
Well, it's got to be something wild, right? Um, so I would say it's probably tables, ladders, and chairs for sure. And I would say it's probably early 2000s if we're setting it in like a timeline, right? We're talking like prime bloodline Usos,
Mm,
undisputed tag champions, and we're talking about prime Dudley Boys, right? Like
mm.
at the height coming into WWE, right? God, that would be a banger of a match, man. TLC, Dudleys and the Usos. I'm gonna go put the Dudleys over, man. I think the Dudleys would take that match because I think it would be just violent enough and just wild enough for it to be like on the level of the original TLC match with Edge and
Yeah.
Christian, Hardys and Dudleys. Yeah. Yeah, that's where I'm going with that.
To send the crowd on home happy though, because I assume the Dudleys might be the heels. Does Rikishi come out and stint face the Dudleys?
Of course he does. You can't have a TLC, no rules match without a little Gaga. Of course. He's coming out in stink face, and at least Bubba Ray is getting the stink face.
That's very, very cool. And now I'm very, very sad it will never happen. So as we wrap this up, Adam, who is your favorite overall wrestler and your favorite current wrestler of all time?
Overall wrestler, of all time, I'm gonna say Steve Austin. Steve Austin just holds a special place for me. And there's a lot of people I could have named, right? But I think Steve Austin is definitely the one. Current Cody Rhodes.
Mm.
Cody Rhodes, I think, is that guy. And again, there's a lot of people that I can say, right? But I think if I'm looking at my favorite overall, it's Cody.
Mm. As someone that hadn't watched a lot of AEW in your own words, and we will wrap this up in a second. It's just I'm curious.
You're good, man.
With you not watching a lot of AEW, what do you think of like Cody Rhodes now? And have you gone back and watched any of his AEWs?
I have, yes. So I think Cody really hasn't. I don't feel like he's really deviated a lot from what he was doing in AEW. I think it's just more amplified and turned up. I think the American Nightmare character was never going to work in AEW because it was a WWE type of character. The American Nightmare is a very sports entertainment character, and AEW is pro wrestling, right? And again, not that there's anything wrong with that. And I should say, I'm not. It's not even necessarily that I don't watch a lot of AEW. I think it's a lot that I'm struggling to connect sometimes with the product, right?
Oh,
so
my
I'm
bad.
still no, you're good, man. You're good. I just want to make sure I clarified that. No, I think that Cody was never going to get as over as he is now back then with that character because of the fact that it is very much a sports entertainment type of character. So I think once he was able to build himself and prove himself up to that point where it was like, oh, now it's time to jump. I think that is really where he should have been. I think that was the right move at the right time, if that makes sense. Right.
Yeah.
So I think going back and watching some of that AEW stuff, I was like, oh, wow, this is like a lot of really like some underappreciated stuff inside of this company. It's not that he had anything bad in that company. Again, I just think that it was the right gimmick for the wrong audience.
I've never thought of it that way, but that is a brilliant way of thinking of his gimmick. I'm not going to lie. But as we wrap this up, Adam, the question that I want to say thank you for a great conversation. But
Absolutely.
The questions that I end all my interviews on is I believe as YouTubers, podcasters, people with social media, whatever word you want to use, content creators, we're all sort of going to live forever in some sort of very strange way if you think about the word. So what is one piece of content you're like, I would love to be remembered for that? And then what is one that you're like, yuck, please get rid of that. Thank you very much.
I don't know if I have any yuck ones yet. As far as like my own personal content?
Can be a mini episode, it can be your own content, whatever.
Yeah, I don't have any yuck ones yet, man. I don't think I have anything that I was like, because typically if I've had interviews that have been the drizzling shits that I've never aired. No, I don't know if I have any yucky ones. I'm sure I will. One that I want to be remembered by. Oh, so at the initial onset of the pandemic, I had a different format for Foundation Radio when I first started. And me and my co-host, we basically took, like for the first 2 weeks, I think, of the pandemic, we took voice notes of our day-to-day lives during the pandemic and the world being shut down. And it was like an hour and change or something. And I go back and listen to it every once in a while. And it's this really, truly like timepiece.
Surreal.
And it's surreal to listen to because you're listening to us like discover this virus and our new lives in real time, right? And how we're accommodating to all of these things and what we're doing with our time. And it's called COVID-19 Killed the Radio Star because we couldn't come up with a good name for it. So we're like, oh, let's do this. And it's still, I think, my favorite thing that I've ever put together, recorded, produced, edited. It's still like my favorite thing that I think I've ever done out of everything. And again, I've had a bunch of amazing people on the show. I've had a bunch of incredible conversations and a bunch of incredible experiences. But for me, that episode is just so special. And I think that's probably what I would want to be remembered for.
That's very, very cool, my friend. And it does sound very, very cool. I'm not going to lie. So, as we wrap this up, Adam, where can the good people find you, your content, etc.? Promote yourself.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, man. You can find me on all forms of social media. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Threads. I think I'm still on TikTok. I have it just so my kids think I'm cool. So I'm at This Is Goober. That's my handle. No, I'm not changing it. It's a brand, pal. You can find Mind of the Meanie. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Mind of the Meanie. You can find Foundation Radio on Twitter at FND Radio Pod, and also on Instagram at Foundation_radio. You can go and pick up your own Wrestle Buddy. I have my own Wrestle Buddy through a company called Brothers Gatter. There's only 25 in existence. I think we're 75% sold out, which is unbelievable. So you can only get them at brothersgatter.com. And you can also pick up Blue Meanies as well, or get a 2-pack of the Mind of the Meanie guys there. And then you can find all of our episodes for Foundation Radio at foundationradio.net. And Mind of the Meanie, you can find us at mindofthemeanie.com. We also have a Patreon page for Mind of the Meanie. You can sign up. We have tiers that start at just $10, and you can watch Meanie and I record early and ad-free every week through a link we send you out through Patreon. So it's patreon.com/Mind of the Meanie. Tom, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for thinking of me and inviting me onto your show. You've been an incredible host and an incredible conversation. And thank you for allowing me the time to be here.
I've really appreciated your time, my friend. So if you guys like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talk Fresh on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Tom Talk Fresh, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye now.